Alrighty. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I hope that you had a wonderful 4th of July. And if you can hear me hoping that you had a wonderful 4th of July, please raise your hand. Yay, raise hands. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. You may put your hands down. It is very nice to see you again. I am very happy to be here. And if you are new to our Bhagavad Gita webinar, I'm Hari-kirtana, and my hope is that by joining us here and in all of our future webinars, you will gain a deeper understanding and develop a deeper relationship with the Bhagavad Gita. I'll do a little bit of traditional housekeeping. We have already seen raising hands. You can ask a question in the question box. So if one of you would please demonstrate that the question box is actually functioning, I would appreciate it very much. You can adjust your audio settings in the upper right-hand corner along with your viewing options, and you need not worry about your microphone or your camera because they are not in play. My audio and my camera are in play. Susan, thank you very much for your thought-provoking question. All right, and thank all of you as you are filing in. I see a few more folks are joining us. I'm very, very happy to see you. Last week, more Karma Yoga, as this is the chapter entitled Karma Yoga. We talked about confused action, what happens when someone is bewildered by the qualities of material nature to the extent that they don't know what to do, and even when they hear good advice as to how to make progress on the path of self-realization, they don't even realize what it is they are hearing. The results of disciplined action as well. What constitutes action informed by transcendental knowledge, and what is the result of that action? So we covered verses 27 through 32 of the 3rd chapter. Tonight, we are concluding the 3rd chapter. So this is the end of the road for the 3rd chapter on Karma Yoga. We will be speaking about harmonizing action to nature. We will reveal the all-devouring enemy of the world. There you go. There's a cliffhanger for you. And then reasoning beyond reason. So we will also have a nice little paradox to go this evening. The verses we will cover are chapter 3, verse 33 to 43. But first, what I'd like to do is just give an overview of the highlights of chapter 3 so that we can appreciate how this conclusion is winding things up for us, is tying things together for us in this chapter. So here we go. In the beginning of chapter 3, we get this verse, and for now I'm going to just deal with translations. We will have the verse that we chant in the Sanskrit, as is our usual habit. In this 6th verse, Krishna says, one who restrains the senses of action but allows the mind to continuously dwell on the objects of sense attraction deludes oneself and is called a charlatan. Yoga begins with the principle of controlling the mind. And the way we begin to bring our mind under control is first by controlling the senses, by not letting every whim of our senses hold sway over us. So by controlling the senses, we control the mind. If, however, we outwardly put on a display of sense control, but in internally we are meditating on those same objects of the senses that we are not acting on, then we've kind of missed the point, and our action can actually become duplicitous, which is to say, this is how someone pretending to be advanced on the path of yoga might utilize some position of power in a relationship to their personal advantage. In other words, this is how duplicity arises, the pretense of yoga rather than the practice of yoga. So we should walk our talk. If we are on a spiritual path, then we should be doing our best in good faith to do the best we can and be honest with ourselves, not to allow that kind of weakness to go unchecked. You know, it's very easy to let the mind do its thing. It's actually difficult, challenging to genuinely direct the mind away from what the mind wants to be running away to. So this requires some effort. And we should be on the lookout for those who appear to be practicing yoga, but in fact are actually cultivating a mentality of pretense. Then a few verses later, free from attachment, act only for the sake of sacrifice. Jagya is the Sanskrit word, and this is a key to understanding this entire third chapter. Offering your actions to Vishnu, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, for by such perfect action you will be liberated from all reactions associated with your deeds. Otherwise, actions will bind you to this material world. So here is the secret to engaging in an action that does not generate a reaction. Ishvara pranidhana confirmed. In the Yoga Sutras, we have this idea of offering the life force to the Supreme Person, Ishvara pranidhana. And here in the Bhagavad Gita now, in the third chapter, we have the very same thing. Make everything you do an offering to the Supreme Person here, indicated by Vishnu. And any action so engaged in is a liberating action, frees one from the reactions to one's actions rather than binds one to reactions to actions. So action yoga, karma yoga, means offering everything one does to the Supreme Person. Please keep that in mind the next time you see a yoga studio offering a karma yoga opportunity, and use this criteria as your evaluation as to whether or not the activity being advertised is karma yoga or good karma. In verse 19, therefore, act as a matter of duty, without attachment to the results of your actions, for by acting without attachment, one surely attains the highest perfection. Each of these systems of yoga that Krishna is describing in the Bhagavad Gita ultimately culminate in the highest perfection. And Krishna will describe that highest perfection, or how each of the different paths of yoga resolve into a singular ultimate destination. Then 21, the actions of a great leader will surely be emulated by others, and the standards set by such a leader serve as the example for all the world to follow. So here, Krishna is making the case that Arjuna should fight on account of providing a good example to the world. He is a great leader, he's famous as a warrior, and should he renounce artificially his obligation to fight, then what kind of example does that set for others? So we also are encouraged to be exemplary in our own pursuit of yoga, because with great power comes great responsibility. In the 27th verse, one who is bewildered by the influence of false ego thinks, I am the doer of activities. In actuality, all activities are carried out by the three qualities of material nature. So here, Krishna gives us the essence of illusion, one who is bewildered, who's become confused, has acquired this sense of, I'm the one who makes things happen. I'm the one who makes the world go around. I can move the universe in line with my desires. Not realizing that they themselves, the spirit soul within the body, is technically not doing anything. Just this, as a person who is dreaming is not actually engaged in their dream, if you consider a higher reality than that dream to be the dreaming person sleeping in bed. So here, ahankara, the word for false ego, aham, I, kara, doer. This is the essence of false ego, is this thinking, I am the doer. Which brings us to where we're at now. And where we're at is I'm going to read the translations and then offer some commentary on each verse individually. But before I do that, does anyone have any question about just the review? Any dangling participles from anything else that we've covered in the third chapter? Susan, thank you. Very basic question. Can you please pronounce jugya again? I've heard multiple pronunciations. All right. So the Y with an N with a tilde over it. Oh, I'm sorry. No, in this I'm thinking of jnana. Never mind. So the J with the N and the tilde over it in the middle is how this is written out in the transliterated Sanskrit. So Y, A, J, N with a tilde, A. The N with a tilde is nya sound. So it's like Curly from the Three Stooges. Nya, 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 nya. It's the middle of your tongue in the center of the roof of your mouth, and then a little body English to it, nya. As opposed to an N right behind your teeth, ne. The J behind that N tends to harden into almost a G sound. So instead of yajna, which is how you would think it would be pronounced when you look at it, it's jugya. So a jug, like a jug of water, gya, like gya, is how it's pronounced, jugya, yugya. The Y also has a J-ish influence. So yugya or jugya, a little bit of a J-ish sound there. Just like B's and V's in Sanskrit also kind of merge together. So Vrindavan, the town where Krishna comes from, the V's and the B's sound very similar. And depending on which part of India you're from, you'll hear either more of a V sound or more of a B sound. Anyway, technically, yajna might be correct. Someone could, who's a Sanskritist, make an argument for that, but I have always understood it to be yagya. Does that help? Okay, good. Neelamadava, When I mentioned about yoga studios offering karma yoga, why is it important to go to certain classes or listen to certain teachers? Well, you want to go to, if you are interested in one aspect of yoga, you go to one teacher. If you want another aspect of yoga, you go to another teacher. It depends on what you're looking for. So, for example, I'm not qualified to do therapeutic yoga for traumatized teenagers. I'm not. I know someone who is. I know someone who's totally expert at that. That's what she does. And so I would say if that's your need, you go to her. So if you're interested in transcendental knowledge, yoga as a transcendental science, then you go to a yoga teacher in whom you have faith in their familiarity with transcendental knowledge and with their practice based on the teachings of transcendental knowledge. So it has to be both. If you're working with someone who knows yoga philosophy but is not practicing yoga philosophy, then their depth of realization will not be so great, and the depth of benefit for you will also not be so great. So it really is just a matter of using your judgment based on what you know. I'm not saying you shouldn't go to a karma yoga class where the beneficiary is some nice do-gooder organization. You pay your donation to get a yoga class and then you benefit some good cause. So I'm not saying that that's a bad idea. You should just understand that in most cases, a benefit class is good karma as opposed to karma yoga. And you take that knowledge with you into your good karma yoga class and support the very excellent cause that the class is benefiting. All right, anything else before we move on? I will be keeping my eye on the Q&A box. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, here are the translations. Oh, I'm going to do the translations. Well, it would be really silly for me to have you look at a screen that just said translations while I redo the translations. That's really just for me so that I know what I'm supposed to be doing next. All right, here we go. Translations. This is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, text number 33. Even those who possess knowledge act according to their own nature. For everyone acts in accord with the tendencies they have acquired due to contact with the three qualities of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. What will repression accomplish? Text 34. Attachment and aversion, which reside in each sense object and are rooted in the senses, are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Therefore, one should observe principles to regulate the senses and their objects so as not to come under their control. Text 35. Acting in accordance with one's own nature, even when such actions appear riddled with fault, is far better than perfectly executing duties prescribed for others. It is better to die in the course of performing your own duty than to risk the peril of following the path of another. Text 36. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vrishni, Krishna, what impels one to improper action, as if driven by force against one's will? Text 37. Blessed Lord said, it is insatiable desire which transforms into anger as it advances from the mode of passion. Know this, that this all-consuming force of ruination is one's enemy in this world. Text 38. Just as fire is covered by smoke, a mirror by dust, and an embryo by the womb, the world is covered by varying degrees of insatiable desire. Within text 39, with an appetite like fire that is never satisfied, this persistent enemy in the form of lust thus conceals the natural perception of conscious beings. Text 40. It is said that the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the places wherein this enemy resides. Through them, it covers true knowledge as it bewilders the embodied soul. Text 41. Therefore, O best of the descendants of Bharat, Arjuna, control your senses from the outset, and thus slay this evil enemy of knowledge and self-realization. Text 42. It is said that the senses are higher than material sense objects, that the mind is higher than the senses, that the intellect is higher than the mind, and that the self is beyond the intellect. Text 43. Therefore, O mighty armed Arjuna, engage reason to go beyond reason, with knowledge of your transcendental nature. Steady your mind by means of spiritual intelligence and slay this formidable enemy known as insatiable desire. It's all very dramatic. Can I read text 38 again? I can do that. Text number 38. Just as fire is covered by smoke, a mirror by dust, and an embryo by the womb, the world is covered by varying degrees of insatiable desire. Donna, you can't hear me. Hold on for just a second. All right, everyone, I'm going to help Donna. Everyone else can hear me, right? Please raise your hands. Yes, okay, so hold on for just a moment. Oops. Oh, all right. Another crisis fades into the oblivion where all crises belong. All right. So we'll go back now and we're going to look at each of these verses individually, and hopefully I'll have something worthwhile to say about each of them. We'll see. If at any point in time you have a question, go ahead and hit the Q&A box and I'll keep my eyes on it. All right, so text 33 revisited. Even those who possess knowledge act according to their own nature. For everyone acts in accord with the tendencies that they have acquired due to contact with the three qualities of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. What will repression accomplish? So I regard this verse as the Lady Gaga verse of the Bhagavad Gita. We're born this way. Whatever we happen to be like, whatever kind of body we have, whatever kind of aptitude or talents we have, whatever inclinations that we are spontaneously drawn to, that's the qualities of material nature, not us. However, we are born with a particular set of qualities. No one actually shows up a blank slate, according to the Bhagavad Gita. We all bring some part of our past lives with us into this life. And the life that we have now is a combination of the desire we have cultivated in past lives and what the law of karma has determined we deserve in relationship to what we desire. So what we want to do is to answer your question, Nilamadeva. Nurture our spiritual lives by leveraging our material nature. Not every part of our material nature is likely to be conducive to spiritual life, helpful. So this is where the control of the senses and thus the control of the mind come in, which is to say, we don't simply give in to every impulse, but rather we redirect every impulse that can be redirected in such a way so that instead of being motivated to fulfill selfish desires and pursue the pleasures of the senses without regard for the impact of that pursuit on our spiritual lives. We do a kind of judo. We act in accordance with our nature, but we change our motivation for acting. And in this way, we leverage whatever nature we have in order to make progress in spiritual life rather than become further entangled in material life. So I hope that answers your question. The next, so we finish then with this idea, what will repression accomplish? Now specifically, Krishna is speaking to Arjuna and encouraging him to act like the warrior that he is, or that the three qualities of material nature have made him to be in this particular birth. So if we simply try to repress our nature and try to act like something we are not inclined to really be, then as we see when we move through these verses, Krishna is telling us that gets us into really dangerous territory. You know, we have to acknowledge the reality of our material conditioning and then leverage it rather than deny it. Okay, text 34. Attachment and aversion, two of the 5 obstacles to yoga listed in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the others being ignorance, ego, and attachment or clinging to life, otherwise known as fear of death. Attachment and aversion, which reside in each sense object and are rooted in the senses. This is really a kind of a far out idea that our attachment to something is found in 2 places, the thing itself and the senses that are attracted to that particular thing. So when we see something that we think is beautiful, well, our sense of beauty is determined by, you guessed it, the particular combination of the qualities of material nature that are working on us. So we have a particular conception of beauty, and then we see something that matches that conception, and we think that's beautiful. Now, objectively, it may be beautiful, or someone else in their subjective experience may think, really? But because we've got a perfect match between the senses and the sense object, then the person whose senses are geared towards thinking that particular sense object is beautiful will think, oh, that's beautiful. And then, of course, the converse is there as well. So this is a really far out way to reframe your experience of an attraction or an aversion, because you can notice how you're averse to something and then look for the quality in the object that you're averse to. Then look to your own senses to see what is it about your senses that makes this object repulsive to you as opposed to attractive to you. And now notice the fact that you are observing your senses and your mind and the object, and none of it is you. Again, this is how you can use reason to go beyond reason. By using spiritual intelligence in the way that we look at our own experience of the world, we can elevate our own consciousness and develop precisely the kind of compassionate detachment that Krishna is speaking about in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so attachment and aversion, which reside in each sense object and are rooted in the senses, are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. And when we experience them in this way, then we can see how that would be. Therefore, one should observe principles to regulate the senses and their objects so as not to come under their control. This gets us to the observance of principles, otherwise known as niyamas, yamas and niyamas in the Yoga Sutras. The purpose of ethical imperatives or ethical guidelines that provide us with parameters for moral decision-making, along with personal observances, is precisely this: to bring the senses progressively under greater and greater control so that we're in control of our mind and senses, not under the control of our mind and senses, and so that every time a sense object whistles at us, we don't immediately go running to it or then run away from a sense object that we might otherwise flee from when we don't have control over our mind and senses. So this is the purpose of regulative principles. They actually bring us to a point of freedom. It is just the opposite of, a life-denying practice of saying you can't enjoy this, you can't enjoy that, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. The kind of guilt-averse reaction to what's the word I'm looking for? Conventional religion. An objection we get, and a perfectly good one, to conventional institutional religion. It is that it denies us the pleasures of life. Well, if it doesn't make clear what religious experience can be purchased by the control of the mind and senses, if it doesn't really make it clear how this is liberating, then sure, what's the point? You're just denying yourself pleasure. What Bhagavad Gita is telling us is that there's a higher standard of pleasure that is available to us, and we have to trade in the pursuit of sense pleasure in order to receive the new and improved model, which is the experience of pleasure through transcendental senses. Any questions on those couple of verses? Well, let me know. Okay. keep my eye on the Q&A box. Meanwhile, we move on. Text number 35. Acting in accordance with one's own nature, even when such actions appear riddled with fault, is far better than perfectly executing duties prescribed for others. It is better to die in the course of performing your own duty than to risk the peril of following the path of another. So here, again, taking into account that Krishna is speaking directly to Arjuna, better that he die in battle than try to adopt the nonviolent path of a monk. It seems counterintuitive because obviously warfare is a more dangerous occupation than being a pacifist recluse. But Krishna is not thinking in terms of some short-term safety. He's actually thinking about the bigger picture. Remember, we begin with we're eternal. And we're wandering through the material world, misidentifying with these qualities of material nature and these temporary material bodies, thinking, oh, this is us. The real danger, as far as Krishna is concerned, is falling deeper into that illusion. Therefore, if one's duty is to fight, and one fights in the right state of mind and dies, they're actually better off than someone who was supposed to fight and lived a long life off in the forest and then dies. Because the path of going off to the forest, in this case, took one deeper into the illusion of how you're the controller. And took one away from detachment, acting without attachment to the results. That's actually more dangerous because that reinforces our sense of illusion, and in the long run, since the body will die in either case, better that the body dies in the course of proper action informed by transcendental knowledge. Text 36. Arjuna has a question. Now, I want to, just as a side note here, mention that Arjuna is asking doubt-based questions. Arjuna's starting point is material consciousness. He's attached to the actions and the results of actions. He's in, how can I avoid this calamity of this battle? How can I make this work so that everyone lives happily ever after? His values are material values. And as Krishna is speaking, at this point, Arjuna is not convinced. And the questions he's asking are based in his doubts about what Krishna is telling him. Later in the Gita, Arjuna will reach a turning point, a point of no return. And there'll be a revelation. And a point of understanding, remembrance of who he is and what he really needs to do. But he won't just say, okay, got it, we're done here. Instead, he will continue to ask questions, but they will become faith-based questions. From the 12th chapter, 11th chapter rather, through to the end of the Gita, at which point Arjuna arrives in the transcendental position. So here we have a doubt-based question. And that question is, O descendant of Vrishni, Krishna, What impels one to improper action, as if driven by force against one's will? So Krishna is telling him that you act according to your nature while controlling the mind and senses. And Arjuna is thinking, well, if I'm, people are not able to do that. Earlier he asked the question about how do I recognize someone who's situated in this position you're describing towards the end of the second chapter. And Krishna describes someone who is equipoised in happiness and distress, who's not disturbed by anything. Arjuna's experience is that even people who know better still are forced to act in some way, and sometimes forced to act in a way that is contrary to what is best for them. Have you ever had that experience that you just felt compelled to do something that you knew wasn't good for you? I've never had that happen to me, ever, once. But I've heard it happens to some people. And Arjuna has also heard that it happens to some people, and so he's asking about it. All right, we've gone through some of our translations and commentary. We're going to chant this verse. This is text 37, a key verse in this chapter, and I will chant each line individually and give you time to chant back. So here we go. I chant, you chant back. For those of you who are new, the accent mark over the S is an SH sound, but not just a regular SH sound as in sh, but it's all the way in the back of your mouth. So it ends up being kind of a lower note SH sound. The bars over the vowels indicate a long or very open sound. The dot under the S is a regular SH sound. The dot under an H at the end of a word, at the end of a line, means that you're going to echo the vowel that preceded that H back. Here we go. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Kama Esha Krodha Esha. Rajoguna Samudbhavaha. Mahashano Mahapapma. Didyenam Ihavairinam. Very good. Here is your translation. The Blessed Lord said, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, also often translated as the Beloved Lord, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Blessed Lord said, it is insatiable desire which transforms into anger as it advances from the mode of passion. Know that this all-consuming force of ruination is one's enemy in this world. So here we have it, the all-devouring enemy of mankind and the world, insatiable. Mary, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have a question? Just want to make sure. Okay. So this insatiable desire, also known as lust, not just lust as in sexual desire without the component of love, but lust as in just a super, super intense desire that you must have something. It can be lust for chocolate or lust for life, if you're Iggy. And it turns into anger. So now we've spoken before about how the Gita is elliptical. That is to say, Krishna introduces an idea and then moves on and then comes back to it, reinforces it, goes deeper into it. So here, once again, we have an intimation of the idea that in attachment to a particular object of desire becomes an insatiable desire for that object, which inevitably turns to anger or frustration when either the object of desire is not attained, or it's attained but it doesn't live up to your expectations, or it's attained and it's great and now you have to work very, very hard to keep it, and eventually you lose it no matter what you do. Therefore, anger arises. From anger, your intelligence, your memory becomes bewildered, your intelligence is lost, and when your intelligence is lost, the self disappears from view. Okay, question, is there righteous anger when a grave injustice occurs? So Donna is asking, and the answer is, of course, yes, because one thing that a yogi cannot tolerate is the suffering of others. So when a grave injustice occurs, then you actually kind of operate on two levels. On the one hand, you understand this is karma, this is the modes of material nature, and therefore that's the nature of the world. You know, I mean, if we look at history, the history is full of injustices, and if history has taught us one thing, it is that people do not learn the lessons of history. Therefore, we can expect that bad things and injustices that have happened in the past will occur in the future, because the world is just like that. However, when we see injustice and we see people are suffering, then, informed by transcendental knowledge so as to be able to be empowered to act from a position of freedom rather than attachment and aversion, we do our best to act according to our nature. So we may have something about our nature that compels us to social action. So we do it, but we do it in such a way so that whatever action we're taking is aligned with the values of yoga, and we understand that we are not in control of the result. We do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. We do the best we can. We do it in the best consciousness that we can possibly do it in. And that's righteous anger, as opposed to garden variety anger, which along with lust and greed are the gates to hell. So, Donna, does that answer your question? While I'm waiting to get a follow-up, if you have a follow-up question, if there's something you want to follow up with that also, please let me know. Meanwhile, the balance of the verse. Know this all-consuming force of ruination is one's enemy in this world. So this is why Krishna is emphasizing in this section the idea of controlling the senses and thereby controlling the mind through the application of spiritual intelligence. Because if it's the other way around, if the mind and the senses are controlling us, that is actually going to ruin everything. Okay. Then 38 again, this very, very nice analogy. Just as fire is covered by smoke, so you can see fire through smoke, and that's like the glimpse of the spirit soul within the material body. A mirror by dust, we want to be able to see ourselves reflected as we truly are. We want to see our true nature reflected in the clean mirror of the calm mind. So the mirror and the dust is indicative of how a dust-covered mirror cannot reflect ourselves back to us accurately. We can't see ourselves. Just as an embryo is covered by the womb. That is to say, we are kind of helpless and vulnerable within this material world. Then the world is covered by varying degrees of insatiable desire. We are surrounded by people with insatiable desires. We may even be one of those people with an insatiable desire, and it's up to us to be self-aware enough to catch it and detached enough to be able to observe it in ourselves. But once we start being able to observe it in ourselves, then we can see how people all around us are so controlled by their mind and senses. And this is one of the symptoms of developing a little bit of spiritual vision, to be able to see how the modes of material nature control others through this agency of insatiable desire for things to be this way or that way, or to get this thing or that thing. Okay, 39, with an appetite like fire that is never satisfied, which is to say that no matter how much you actually gratify an insatiable desire, that's what it means to be insatiable. Too much is never enough. There's just not enough of whatever it is that your mind and senses want in order to satisfy this desire. In fact, if you feed it, it just gets bigger. This persistent enemy in the form of lust thus conceals the natural perception of conscious beings. Our natural perception is spiritual vision. We have a set of spiritual senses that is currently inactive. So in order to activate those spiritual senses, we need to overcome this habit that has been developed over innumerable lifetimes of material desire. 40, it is said that the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the places wherein this enemy resides. Through them it covers true knowledge as it bewilders the embodied soul. And then the next verse, therefore, O best of the descendants of Bharat, control your senses from the outset and thus slay the evil enemy of knowledge and self-realization. It is said that the senses are higher than material sense objects, that the mind is higher than the senses, and that the intellect is higher than the mind, and that the self is beyond the intellect. Therefore, engage reason to go beyond reason. That is to say, we are encouraged to use our intelligence to sort of flip the mind and senses as if we were in a judo match, in order to go beyond the intellect to the self, to the experience of the self proper. Because ultimately we cannot reason our way to self-realization, but we can use reason to override the impulses of the mind and senses with a theoretical understanding of what is to be gained by that control, which is to say the freedom of pure consciousness. With knowledge of your transcendental nature, steady your mind by means of spiritual intelligence and slay this formidable enemy known as insatiable desire. Okay. So, any questions about these final verses? While I fix my old and achy knees. Hard to know how long I was just in hero pose, even with a cushion. While I wait anxiously for your questions, there are still a few things that I want to share with you. One of them is that, once again, as I observe Murrow's law, here's what I told you. We have concluded our chapter on Karma Yoga. Although the section on Karma Yoga continues, the chapter itself is concluded. Harmonizing our action to nature, that is to say, acting in accordance with our conditioned nature in such a way as to arrive or move closer to our constitutional nature. We have identified insatiable desire, otherwise known as lust, as the all-devouring enemy of mankind. And by the engagement of our intelligence in order to control the mind and senses, we reason our way beyond reason to proximity to the self. So that's what just happened. If your questions arise after the fact, then you know where to find me. And hey, check it out. You can follow me on Medium, medium.com/@Hari-kirtan or Hari.kirtan. In case you missed it, I wrote a little something yesterday on the 4th of July while people were celebrating the birthday of America. The real meaning behind Jefferson's self-evident truths, a little connection between politics and yoga. And I suspect, Donna, this might actually play to what you were speaking about. In fact, I'm sure that it does, and I'm sure that you know that it does. I have evidence to this effect. Thank you. So there you go. Please follow me on Medium if you are on Medium or inclined to be mediumed. All right. Hari@Hari-kirtan.com is the place that you want to send your questions to. I am very, very happy to be heading back up to Frederick, Maryland and Saul Yoga for Yoga Sutra's Immersion Weekend. That'll be Saturday and Sunday, July 14th and 15th. So if you are anywhere near Frederick or not, hop on a plane and fly into the Frederick, Maryland International Airport and join me for this Yoga Sutra's Immersion Weekend. My 300-hour advanced yoga teacher training program is just a couple of months away. So if you are considering taking an advanced yoga teacher training or a yoga teacher training course, I have 2 courses that are part of the complete training that you can take as a teacher or as a practitioner. One, the pranayama course with Braja Kishori, 24 hours of advanced pranayama study and learning how to teach pranayama. And our advanced physical and energetic anatomy course with Michelle Lee, that's a 28-hour specialized course that will be wonderful for both practitioners and for teachers. Donna, I'm sorry I will miss you, but I look forward to seeing you when I am back in October, or if you come down to visit our nation's capital. I hope to see you next week. In fact, I hope to see all of you next week on Thursday, same time, same channel. We will begin Chapter 4, the Yoga of Knowledge. We'll talk about the transmission of transcendental knowledge. That is to say, how in the yoga tradition, transcendental knowledge is passed forward. And Krishna will reveal the reason for his appearing in the world in the first place. We will cover verses 1 through 9 in the Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 4. Okay. All right. Last chance for questions. Otherwise, I thank you all very, very much for choosing to spend this portion of your evening with me. Jess, you're very welcome. Nice to see you. All of you, thank you very, very much. And I hope to see you all again soon. You're welcome, you're welcome. It's nice to see you all here. End meeting for all.